scratch and hand painted. And it was always out for the holidays. And funny, it brought back so many memories. And memories have a sense of smell. That bowl was always used for warm biscuits at Christmas dinner. And I could smell them. And my mouth would start to water. And I would hold that bowl, and I was no longer 66 with stiff joints and gray hair. I was 6 or 7 or 8. Didn't matter, because Christmas never changed at our house. Back 60 some odd years ago, the holiday season didn't start so early like it does now. To the eyes of any 6-year-old where I grew, holiday season began with poor posture. And that poor posture was rested with the local mailman. And that poor man carried the weight of the holiday season to us kids on his back. The Sears Christmas catalog. Every one weighed 10 pounds, 1,000 pages, 800 of which were toys. And that's when we knew that the holiday season had arrived. About a week later, the rest of the world caught up on Thanksgiving. And where I grew up in the Northeast, Thanksgiving always began with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and it was followed locally by a showing of March of the Wooden Soldiers with Laurel and Hardy, and followed by the original King Kong, because you can see how King Kong just gently flows with the holiday season. And from there on in, the holidays were in full gear. And I don't know why they insisted on continuing school between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Us kids weren't paying attention anyway. We were much too busy to do our homework, and there was letters to Santa to write, and hints to our parents. And we got to go to the local department store to visit Santa. And every night, Christmas would arrive in the house via the television set with Perry Como or Rosemary Clooney and Dean Martin, and of course Bing Crosby. And it would be that way right up till Christmas morning. Now Christmas, just before Christmas, on my house around the 15th, we would decorate our tree. Because my parents told me we were doing Santa a favor. We would decorate it, and that way he didn't have to. So we would decorate it. My father would plug in the lights. Ta-da! Nothing. Because those were the days when if one light bulb was out, they all were out. And my father would spend an hour and a half on his knees checking every individual bulb until he found the culprit. And then he'd plug it in, and ta-da! A perfect Christmas tree. So perfect that from December 15th until about a month later, my mother would redistribute every ornament until she got it just right. And then we'd take the tree down. And Christmas morning would arrive, and wrapping paper flying in the air, and empty boxes, baseball gloves, and Davy Crockett coonskin caps, and Lone Rangers 6-shooters, and baseballs, and footballs, and Lincoln logs, and Oh, it was good to be an only child on Christmas Day. Then I'd get dressed, my grandparents would come over, and then we would open the presents that my grandparents and parents bought me. Socks, pajamas, school clothes. Yeah. So I'd get out of the house as soon as I could, went all over the neighborhood visiting my friends so we could compare our gifts. And a little bit after noon on Christmas, I'd have to come home, warm up, get dressed, usually in something they just bought me, because we were going to my grandparents for dinner. Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner didn't really matter. It was exactly the same 2 times a year. You always had a choice. You could have turkey or you can go hungry. Now, actually, the dinners began the night before. I grew up in a small little Cape Cod style house, and our kitchen was about 125 square feet. I mean, we're talking about this area right in here. And the food prep area was the size of a postage stamp. And there, somewhere in there, was my mother, all 4'10" of her, doing all this prep work, stuffing and green bean casserole. You know, I was a teenager before I figured out that green bean casserole was made with cream of mushroom soup. I thought it had always been school glue. And pies, and they 5, 6 pies, and it was up to the ceiling in Pyrex and ceramics. And we'd ride over a short distance to my grandparents' house. And my father, my mother, and I, we'd carry in all this stuff. Now, my grandparents' house was built around 1920. And if it was at all possible, their kitchen was smaller than ours. If it wasn't for a clothes washer that had wheels on it and a hunk of butcher block on top, she would have had no prep space at all. So we walk in with all this Pyrex, aluminum foil, we plop this all down. The kitchen has now completely disappeared. We've even loaded up half the dining room table. And there's my grandmother basting the turkey. My grandmother was a world-class baster, and she went after it, ladles and stock flying, with the attitude of, I know you didn't swim in life, Mr. Turkey, but you're going to swim today, or I'm going to know the reason why. So we put our coats on in their bedroom, and we come out, and Nan, that's what I call my grandmother, Nan was no longer in the kitchen. Nan was sitting at the dining room table at the chair where she could see into the kitchen, and my grandmother had disappeared, and the Sarge was there. Now, the Sarge was a nickname that I didn't give her in a fit of being a teenage wise guy. That was a nickname my mother laid on her, because she would sit in there. Now, this kitchen was so small. It really was a one-person kitchen, but there's the 3 of us. And from her chair, she would look in, and I swear I heard an announcer yell, "Let the games begin." Because she'd start. Dorothy, heat up the green beans. Fred, sharpen the knives. Freddie, make the dip. Dorothy, baste the bird. Fred, put out the raw vegetable. Freddie, do this. Dorothy, do that. Fred, do this. Dorothy, do that. And my mother, who had no patience on a good day, she went off like Mount St. Helens. Hey, Sarge, you want to lighten up a little bit? My grandmother would get all upset. Well, there's no need to be nasty about it, Dorothy. She says, Mom, you don't have to order us around. We haven't changed a thing since Freddie was born. We know what you're doing. But I just want to make sure that you don't forget anything. And by the way, don't forget to, Mom, stop. You've got me basting the green beans, Freddie setting the raw vegetables, and Fred sharpening the turkey. Just stop. You've got us all confused. Now, where was my grandfather during this? Well, he's in the living room, very safe, in his favorite chair right next to the television. Because he had lived since 1925 with these two women and knew enough to stay out of the way. So there we are in this tiny little space, my mother, my father, and I, when there's only enough room for one, and we're jostling around like football players after a fumble on the goal line. Finally, I hear from my grandfather, hey, Freddie, come on in here. So I'd go in, hiya, Pop, what you need? It's not what I need, it's what you need. What you need is to stay out of that kitchen. Doesn't matter what you do, you're only going to redo it anyway. So sit here and watch the game with me. Well, I spent all year watching one game or another with my grandfather, so I was very happy to stay out of that mess. And slowly, the commotion was in the background. It was always really in the background of my grandfather because he was hard of hearing. And he wore a hearing aid. Now, the hearing aids then were much different from today's. The hearing aid was in his ear, it was about the size of my thumb, and it had a wire that ran down his neck and into his shirt to an amplifier that was about yo big. And that was clipped to his undershirt. And the inventor of this not only went to hand to people in a sound-driven world, but he saved at least one marriage. See, because I was a witness to it, my grandmother would come in and get on Pop over something. Oh, do this, oh, do that, horse do this, horse do that. And my grandfather would sort of shift in his chair so his back was slightly to her, and he'd reach inside his shirt and shut off the amplifier. So now, to my grandfather's great delight, my grandmother's standing over him like this. And he would just giggle and say, you look like Gloria Swanson. 60 years, I swear they were married for 60 years because of that hearing aid. But even I noticed eventually the commotion was dying down, which meant one thing: it was almost dinner time. Dad had been released from duty and came in to check on the game, which means Mom and Nan were putting the finishing touches on that dinner. Actually, Mom was putting the finishing touches on. Nan was carving the turkey. Now, you know the scene. The family gathered around the dining room table. The father standing at the head with the knife and the fork. And the big, beautifully golden brown turkey in front of him. Just like that Norman Rockwell painting. And you can forget about it because it ain't happening. First off, Nan, the dad, and my grandfather were never allowed to carve the turkey. They were only allowed to eat it. They were perfectly capable. But Dad would never be able to do it to my grandmother's liking And my grandfather, she'd say, he's left-handed, it won't turn out right. So we just let her do it. Now the other reason why we never invited Miss Norman Rockwell to our dinners isn't the who, it's the what. And the what in this case was my grandparents' house. Like I said, it was built around 1920, and it had gone through some changes over the years. Now I have heard that this house, I heard that houses settle. This one had settled so much it was in a coma. The floor where the dining room table was warped. Now I don't mean a gentle warp that you can't tell except if you have a level. I'm talking about a floor that went up and down, left to right, like the 17th green at the Masters. And if I dropped the marble, boom, right into the one pipe here that was in the living room floor. So, this, as a result, the dining room table never experienced all four of its legs on the floor at the same time. And there wasn't a shim east of Forever that was going to correct this problem. This table would wobble if you were stirring your coffee. So you can imagine what would have happened, someone trying to carve a turkey on this thing. Just putting the turkey down at one end would have had the same effect as the fat kids sitting on the seesaw. So the carving was done in the kitchen. And even how we set the table was interesting. We had to do it for balance. The heavy mashed potatoes at one end had to be balanced by the stuffing at another, and carrots on this side had to balance the peas over here. The muffins in that bowl were on a TV table right next to us, and the turkey platter went right in the middle. But at this side, we all loved gravy, and at this side was my grandmother's gravy boat that was her mother's. Now this thing had to hold about a half a gallon of gravy. Well, at least it did to a little kid. So we sit around the table. I'm at one end, uphill. Pop's at opposite me, the other side. My mother and grandmother are to port, and my father's to starboard. And you even had to be careful of what you put on your plate and when. I, one year, took a ladle full of peas and put it on my plate, and they started to roll downhill off my plate, parallel to my father, gently breaking with the slope of the floor, parallel to my grandfather, and right in my grandmother's lap. From then on, I put the mashed potatoes first to act as a dam. Then there was the great gravy tsunami of 1962. I went to put gravy on everything, and I lifted this giant ladle, or a gravy boat, and the 75-year-old bottom gave way. That wave of gravy took out 7 biscuits, 3 sets of silverware, every napkin on the table, and my grandfather's brand new pair of brown pants. But we'd relax, we'd hold hands and we'd pray. And all that came to my mind when I held that bowl, and it does every year. Things have changed over the years. I miss those people very much. They're all gone now. And our Christmas at my house at least has the ability to be quite different. More people, but a lot noisier. I mean, if everybody shows up, there's 21 of us sitting around the table. But we always hold hands, and we always pray. That's the thing. When in doubt, we pray. But every year that I can remember, we've had an awful lot to be thankful for. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you.